Heading into their first matchup of the season, the Seahawks and Rams have far more in common than just the fact they're both 7-2 and sitting atop the NFC West. We're going to be stacking up these two NFC West rivals against one another on a jam-packed Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Greetings, 12s. You're listening to the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. Whether you're tuning in from Oak Harbor, Washington, or Salinas, California, we appreciate each and every one of you. And thank you for making Locked On Podcast Network the number one sports podcast network. Much appreciated to all the 12s for contributing to that. Seahawks Rams beginning to jumpstart their preparation for their first matchup against each other this year, a Week 11 bout in SoFi Stadium. Seahawks and Rams practicing today. We're going to dive into how these teams are similar and how they are different. You'll be surprised how these teams have gotten to very similar results. And we've got our typical matchup Wednesday deep dive into all the positional battles you need to watch as these two rivals get ready to fight for sole possession of first place in the NFC West. All brought courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Record-wise, the Seahawks and Rams will get ready to duel for the first time this season, both sitting with sterling 7-2 records. The Seahawks currently would be the number 2 seed in the NFC, the Rams the number 5, with the Seahawks having the tiebreaker for divisional record. They're 2-1 in the NFC West. The Rams are 1-1. So heading into this game, obviously, we know the records are the same, but it is crazy when you look at the offensive and defensive stats for these two teams, Rob. They're the only two teams in the league that are both in the top 5 in points on offense and points allowed on defense. They're top 5 in scoring, offense, and defense. But there are so many other things that these two teams share. When you look at just the offenses against each other, you could almost, throw a dart at both sides and you could say, well, I don't know which one I'm really throwing at because the numbers are almost exactly the same across the board. It's quite crazy, actually.
It really is, and I've used the Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other before, but this just blows everything else out of the water. When you look at just how similar the numbers are almost across the board. Here on offense, those of you watching on YouTube, you can see for yourself. Thank you so very much, as Corbin often says. But for those of you who are not, I'm just going to read off some of these numbers. Obviously, the record 7-2 for both squads. When it comes to offensive points per game, the Los Angeles Rams are averaging 27.9 points per game. The Seahawks 27.4. When it comes to passing yards per game, it's 259.9 for the LA Rams, 246.1 for the Seahawks. Rushing yards per game, 113.4 for the LA Rams, 114.3 for the Seahawks. Third down rate, 41% for the LA Rams, 39.2 for the Seahawks. Big plays, 121 big plays for the LA Rams, 123 for the Seahawks. Red zone conversion rate when against the touchdowns, right when you're in the red zone, 63.4% of the times the LA Rams get a touchdown, 67.7% for the Seattle Seahawks. And then the most interesting one in my mind would be turnovers. That's one that there is a little bit of a difference. 7 turnovers total for the Los Angeles Rams through the first 7 games. 16 turnovers for the Seahawks. That obviously is a big one that the Seahawks are going to have to be able to corral a little bit if they want to enter SoFi Stadium and leave with victory.
It's crazy when you put those numbers together because what's fascinating about all of this is that the turnover margin, Seattle has more than twice as many turnovers as what the Rams do. And yet almost universally across the board, every other statistic in terms of points scored on offense per game, these two teams are less than half a point apart per game in that metric. They're very close in third down percentage. They're close in red zone touchdown rate. Seattle with a slight bump there compared to the Rams. These numbers are all eerily similar. The Seahawks have managed to do it with all those turnovers. That's what's flabbergasting, is that they've had this many turnovers. They're still putting that many points on the board. So that is the one stark difference. And the way these teams have gotten here, the football nerd in me absolutely loves looking at personnel groupings. And the Rams are still a primarily 11 personnel-based team, 68% of the time with three receivers, one running back, one tight end in the field. The Seahawks are near the bottom of the league at 34.8% for 11 personnel groupings. Seattle loves their 12 personnel with two tight ends in the field, 28.8%. The Rams at 12% are in the middle of the pack. But what has really changed for Sean McVay's offense this year, the Rams are running 13 personnel with three tight ends in the field 16.9% of the time. Like, this is not typical Sean McVay offense. They have very rarely used three tight ends in the field. They've actually used four tight ends in the field a couple times this year. Like, they're all in on the tight ends, and there's been a change of the guard for this Rams team compared to what they've done in the past, and that's Sean McVay playing to his personnel. He's as good as any coach in the league at doing that. Seattle, they run a lot of the two-back stuff. The Rams don't touch any of that. So the way these teams move the ball and score a lot of points and get all those explosive plays, they don't do it structurally the same, at least in terms of the personnel groupings. They run a lot of very similar schemes, though, out of those personnel groupings, with both of them heralding from that Shanahan coaching tree. So you're going to see some similarities, differences in how they attack with their personnel groupings. But the same can be said on defense as well, Rob. I mean, Seattle is a heavy nickel team, almost 88%. The Rams, they run dime more than 33% of the time, and they're middle of the pack in nickel. So you are going to see differences in how they deploy their defensive personnel groupings. But again, eerily similar numbers across the board for both these defenses that have been top five defenses this year.
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, again, the numbers are going to be pretty crazy in terms of how similar they are. One thing I wanted to kind of mention, you mentioned how often that the Los Angeles Rams employ the three tight end look. And I think that it might surprise some folks just how productive their tight ends are. I mean, obviously they have their top two wide receivers. We're going to be talking a lot about Puka Nacua and Devontae Adams. But again, it might surprise some folks to know that the Los Angeles Rams number three receiver is the running back Kyren Williams. Their number 4, number 5, number 6 pass catchers are all tight ends before you actually get to the next wide receiver, which is, again, just something that's a little bit different than what we have seen from Sean McVay in the past. For those of you who, again, are watching on YouTube, you can see these numbers, but for those of you who are not, then I'll throw out some of these kind of eerily similar statistics for the Rams on defense and the Seahawks on defense, of course. Again, we're talking about two squads that are 7-2, obviously, and they are allowing similar amount of points, yards in the through the air, yards on the ground. When it comes to points allowed, the Rams are allowing just 16.3 yards per game. The Seahawks are actually allowing more points per game, 18.4 points per game there. But when it comes to passing yards, 216 yards per game for the Los Angeles Rams, 216.7 for the Seahawks, 96.9 rushing yards allowed by the Los Angeles Rams, 90.7 yards allowed by the Seahawks, 33.3 third downs allowed by the Rams, 36.9 third down conversions allowed by the Seahawks, 8.4 sacks per passing attempt from the Rams, 9.3 sacks per passing attempt for the Seahawks, a 46.4 red zone touchdown rate allowed for the Rams, 53.3% allowed by the Seahawks. And then finally, the turnovers. The Los Angeles Rams have created 14 turnovers, interceptions, forced fumbles. The Seahawks have turned the ball over on defense 12 times. One of the interesting things, however, one key difference, similar to what we talked about before with the Seahawks on turnovers on offense, Corbin, the Seahawks have 3 defensive or special teams touchdowns. Obviously, the 2 big returns by DeMarcus Lawrence a week ago, and then also the Torrey Horton punt return, whereas the Los Angeles Rams, with those 14 turnovers, still have 0 points created off of those turnovers, either via defense or on special teams.
And that's why there's a gap when you look at points per game, just general points per game. Seattle's north of 30 points per game. The Rams are a little bit below 28, which is still outstanding, and they've done that on offense. But the point is the Seahawks have been able to manufacture points in a number of different ways that the Rams to this point have not. The Seahawks have been the more efficient team, getting to the quarterback by almost a full percent in terms of sacks. So there's some things that certainly favor the Seahawks. There's some things that you look at from the Rams' perspective. They're giving up less points per game on defense. So that's working in their favor. They've also had a few lucky breaks, like not getting to play against Lamar Jackson, for example, when the Ravens played him. So there's some things you can nitpick here, but there's no denying it that these two teams, they are twins in a lot of different ways. They might not necessarily get to the same spot doing the same things, but a lot of similarities. That's why they're both 7-2, and that's why, to me, this is the game of the year so far in the NFC coming up here on Sunday at SoFi Stadium. We're going to keep digging deeper into this matchup with the matchups. We're going to start with the Seahawks on offense going up against the Rams defense. That's coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. And with their Trademaster perks like priority shipping and dedicated support, make the whole process smoother. Join the free Trademaster program today and score some serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and dedicated support lines. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. This episode's also brought to your way by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on Prize Picks, being right means cashing in with football back in swing. Prize Picks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. Just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. All season long, I've been playing Prize Picks, such a fun way to stay locked in throughout the course of the NFL season. It's quick, easy, and honestly my favorite way to follow along with football. I love checking out the projections like Matthew Stafford for more or less than 270 passing yards against the Seahawks, or Ken Walker III with more or less than 1 rushing touchdown against the Rams. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups. After you play your first $5 lineup, that's the code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. He's Rob Rang. A special thanks to each and every one of the 12s tuning in, and thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Seahawks and Rams, round 1 coming up on Sunday, and maybe the biggest game in the NFL so far this season, as we just talked about 2 eerily similar teams that have been top 5 scoring offenses as well as top 5 scoring defenses, and both near the top in DVOA. This has been a really exciting start for both these franchises, and now you get a chance to create a little bit of separation and get sole possession, at least for now, in the NFC West with these two teams meeting up at SoFi Stadium. Let's start diving into the matchups, Rob. Seahawks on offense going up against the Rams on defense. And there's a number of matchups that we could point out here, but we're going to get a little specific here because normally when we're talking offensive line, it might be the tackles going up against the edge rushers, the interior offensive line going up against the interior defensive line. But in this particular game, this Rams team, they have 2 former Florida State standouts Jared Verse, Braden Fisk, that they love to line up on the same side of the field, particularly on the right side of the defense going up against the left side of the offensive line. That is something that this team has done a lot this year. They like to pair those two, run stunt games with them, you name it. That puts all the pressure on Charles Cross and Gray Zabel in this game, the left side of the O-line going against those two high motor, high octane players in Verse and Fisk. And they got to be ready for everything. They got to be ready for bull rushes from both those guys. They got to be ready for twist stunts, tackle, and exchanges. You name it, they have to be ready for all that stuff. So for Seattle offensively to be able to move the ball and score points, those two guys are going to have to be able to hold their own against two of the best young defensive linemen in the NFL.
Yeah, and what's funny is they're actually not, either one of them is nearly as productive as Byron Young. Byron Young has 9 sacks for the Rams so far. That's more than double what Jared Verse has. He has 4, and Braden Fisk only has 1. That said, I do think that this is a very formidable matchup for all of the reasons that you just talked about, Corbin. The familiarity that Braden Fisk and Jared Verse have in playing together at Florida State, the physicality with which they play, just the intensity with which they play. I mentioned that Braden Fisk only has 1 sack so far this season. His numbers have completely tailed off from what he did as a rookie, where he was voted 3rd among NFL rookies when it came to defensive rookie of the year. He had 8.5 sacks. He had a sack of Sam Darnold in the Rams playoff victory. He had another sack. Even the Rams lost to the Philadelphia Eagles, the eventual Super Bowl champions, of course. So, again, Braden Fisk is a terrific player, and I have some concerns about his physicality against Gray Zabel. That was one of the only concerns I had about Gray Zabel coming out of North Dakota State, watching his tape at the Senior Bowl, is that he does have relatively narrow shoulders, and that can lead him to be a little bit vulnerable to bull rushers. We've seen that against Dalvin Tomlinson, for example, against the Arizona Cardinals. And so, again, I do have some concerns in that regard. Charles Cross, same kind of thing. While he's very agile, at the same time, he has shown a little bit of vulnerability to bull rushes. Whereas on the other side with Byron Young, he is more of a speed guy who uses his speed to get outside. It also counters as well. I do think that Abe Lucas is going to be able to handle that, but there's no question about it, Corbin. If the Seahawks are unable to slow down the Los Angeles Rams pass rush, then we could see the same Darnold that struggled while with the Minnesota Vikings in this particular game. And obviously that does not bode well at all for the Seahawks to escape SoFi Stadium with the victory.
And you also have to worry about Turner in the inside too. So it's not like the Rams have one guy and then there's a drop-off. They've got a really good D-line. But in particular, the way that Fisk and Verse can feed off each other and going up against that left side is something to absolutely watch. On the outside, this is one of the more fascinating things for me with the Rams because they've had injuries at corner. They lost guys in the offseason as well. Ahkello Witherspoon goes down. He's on injured reserve. They bring in Emmanuel Forbes, who Dan Quinn basically said, I've had enough of you, and former first-round pick. The Commanders kicked him to the curb, and he's been up and down at times, but he's also got 2 interceptions and 5 pass breakups, and there's no denying, when you go back and watch his college tape, Emmanuel Forbes is a guy that got his hands on the football a lot. And so I'm curious. I mean, this is a guy that is, man, he might be 160 pounds soaking wet. He is a narrow corner. I'm wondering how he handles physically going up against somebody like a Jackson Smith and Jigba, who is much more strongly built. And we know that he breaks tackles and the ability to be able to get out, in and out of his breaks quickly and accelerate. And then on the other side, Kobe Durant is not a big guy either and not necessarily a burner. You're going to have to deal with Rashid Shaheed at that other receiver spot. And oh, by the way, Cooper Kupp's playing his old team, and he's going to have a chip on his shoulder going into this game. The Rams have been a really good defense all year in the secondary. And yet at the same time, you're looking at these matchups and you feel like the Seahawks have some advantages here to absolutely be able to throw the football as long as Sam Darnold's got the time. It feels like those one-on-one matchups, Seattle's got a lot working for them in this one, at least in my opinion.
No, I 100% agree with you. I think this is one of the advantages that Seattle has in this game. While I am very concerned, as I mentioned before, about the offensive line holding up against the Rams defensive line, I do think that there should be some openings in coverage that Seattle's wide receivers and certainly Sam Darnold, the quarterback, should be able to exploit. I love the fact that you mentioned just the small stature really of Emmanuel Forbes. He's tall. I mean, he's 6'1", but at the same time, he's listed at 180 pounds. And I think that you're probably right. I think he's more in that 160-pound range. Now, he does have the 4.3 speed to be able to run with Rashid Shaheed, but at the same time, Jackson Smith and Jigba should be able to use his ability to break tackles, certainly Cooper Kupp as well. So really interested about that and how Seattle is maybe able to create some yards after the catch. Quentin Lake, a former UCLA safety, has been playing an awful lot of the nickel cornerback spot. Again, as a former safety, I wonder if he has the agility to really be able to handle a Cooper Kupp or a Rashid Shaheed if they wind up in the slot as well. So again, some fascinating matchups there on the outside. It's also interesting that the Rams made a trade themselves to kind of, acknowledging their cornerback issues. They got former first-round pick Roger McCreary from the Tennessee Titans, but McCreary hasn't seen the field essentially on defense over the last couple of weeks. Almost all of his snaps have been on special teams. So that might be something that the Rams are hoping to, incorporate into this football game. McCreary does have physicality and good speed, but at the same time, he has proven to be somebody who can miss an occasional tackle as well. So again, this does feel like a Rams secondary. If there's a chink in the armor, I think it's the Rams secondary.
And look, I think the linebacking core is so weird because the Rams have not made major investments there really throughout Sean McVay's entire time in LA. The only time that they did was bringing Bobby Wagner in for a one-year deal. That's been the one significant move, and they have generally been fine with late-round picks and undrafted guys, and that's what they're doing again. Now, as you mentioned, Nathan Landman has been really good. He's leading the team in tackles. He's got 1.5 sacks. He's got the ability to blitz. The Rams are utilizing him in that regard. They've also got Spates, a second-year linebacker, another guy that was undrafted that they brought in that's played a lot of snaps for them. With that being said, I think that this is still, when you're looking from a talent perspective, if I'm the Seahawks, I'm trying to find ways to game plan getting my running backs matched up against the linebackers for the Rams in the passing game. I think this is a game that you could see Zach Charbonnet and Ken Walker III finally break out a little bit in that regard, get them lined up with these players. As good as Landman is at blitzing and getting downhill, I do think that matching him up with the running backs, and you can mix the tight ends in this discussion too, but I think the running backs in this game, you get those one-on-ones attacking them in the middle of the field, forcing them to have to run sideline to sideline. I think Seattle can get something going with that quick passing game to the running backs. And I also like both these backs, and George Halani can be lumped in there too. I like all these guys being able to create some missed tackles on the Rams linebackers if they can get to the second level. That's the big question here. But it still feels like a group watching on film. There's a lot of stats. There's a lot of tackles. But it feels like there's also been a lot of missed opportunities for these linebackers when teams have been able to get to the second level. It's a really good D-line, which has helped these guys. But this is another one that I could see go either way with some of the other position groups impacting it. But I do like the receiving aspect of the running backs matching up against these linebackers.
It's one of the biggest reasons, Corbin, why I'm so excited about how Clint Kubiak has employed Jackson Smith and Jigba and now Rashid Shaheed as out of the backfield. And really taking advantage of their speed, their elusiveness, because I do think that this is a Rams linebacking core that is a little bit vulnerable to agile pass catchers. Obviously, as wide receivers, they are certainly going to be able to provide that agility. So I think that is a matchup that is something that Seahawks could be able to exploit if, as you said, they are able to hold up at the point of attack and be able to create some running lanes. I also think screen passes are going to be something that Seattle should be able to take advantage of. Now, that said, the injury to at the center position is going with Jalen Sundell, not likely to be able to play in this football game. Then Ola Oluwatimi, that's not been his strength in the past. Is changing directions at the second level. But at the same time, I think that Seattle's guards, they might be able to be a little bit more effective in that way, and certainly the offensive tackles, the tight ends as well. Again, I do think that is something that Seattle should be able to just invite that Los Angeles Rams pass rush to get into Sam Darnold's face and hopefully be able to dump the ball over the top and then be able to get Seattle's running backs involved in that way. I think that this is potentially a splash performance for Kenneth Walker III. His straight line speed could be a big difference maker in this particular game.
When we come back, we are going to flip the script. We've got the Seahawks defense against Matthew Stafford and the high-flying Rams offense. 3 key matchups to watch on those two sides of the ball. We'll get to that up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. As the days get shorter and the nights come earlier, it can start to feel a little heavier, especially when life is already packed with work, family, everything else. This season, it's so important to reach out and check in with friends, family, or even yourself. Just like checking on a teammate or reconnecting with someone you haven't seen in a while can lift your spirits, reaching out for therapy can make a real difference too. BetterHelp makes that first step easier by connecting you with a licensed therapist online from wherever you are. Therapy isn't just for when things are falling apart. It's about staying balanced and growing through the tough seasons. BetterHelp matches you with a therapist who fits your needs, and you can switch anytime if it's not the right match. This month, don't wait to reach out. Whether you're checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself, BetterHelp makes it simple to take that first step. Listeners get 10% off their first month at BetterHelp.com/lockedon. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Because taking that step towards support might just leave you wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? You're listening to Matchup Wednesday here on the Locked On Seahawks podcast. I'm your host, Corbin Smith, also lead reporter covering the Seahawks for Emerald City Spectrum. My co-host in crime, Rob Rang. A special thanks to all the 12s who are listening in, and thank you as always for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate your support of the show. Continuing to dive into all the big matchups to watch coming up on Sunday, we've got the 7-2 Seahawks traveling to face the 7-2 Rams, a battle for sole possession in first place in the NFC West. Looking at the Rams offense, we mentioned earlier, this is a high-flying attack, a top 5 scoring offense. Matthew Stafford's been dishing out the dynamite, very similar fashion to what Sam Darnold's been doing in Seattle. 2 of the most prolific downfield throwers, and big reason why, the weapons that are at Matthew Stafford's disposal. Davante Adams coming in as the replacement for Cooper Kupp. Kupp coming to Seattle. And then you've got, of course, Puka Nacua, who is having another fantastic season for the Rams. 2 totally different style receivers, but 2 guys that put up massive numbers year in, year out. And Davante Adams already has 9 touchdowns. He's become Matthew Stafford's go-to guy in the red zone. Really has, I don't want to say reawakened his career, but he has hit the all-pro caliber again this season after struggling a little bit in New York last year. Some time with the Raiders that didn't necessarily go the way he was hoping, but this is a dynamic receiving core. This is a true strength on strength going up against a healthy Reek Woolen, a healthy Devin Witherspoon. Josh Jobe has a chance to be back this week. Nick Eamon-Warry's been playing some of the corner. This is truly that get your popcorn ready matchup in this game.
Yeah, no question about it. I think that Davante Adams maybe just is getting a little bit more Taco Bell, out here on the West Coast, and the production that speaks for itself. As you said, those 9 receiving touchdowns. He's only got 42 receptions on the season, but that's, as they said about the Hall of Famer Chris Carter, all he does is catch touchdowns. Davante Adams is just magical within that 5-yard window. I mean, his ability to get a clean release, to use the little kind of shimmy shake to be able to get himself open, whether it be in cuts, whether it be the stop fades in the end zone. I think it's going to be fascinating to see how Seattle specifically tries to match up with Davante Adams. I would not be surprised at all if they try to use Tariq Woolen on Davante Adams, just because of the length that he provides. So I am very curious to see that, because Devin Witherspoon, as talented as he is, we have seen him getting beat. And Woolen, when he is locked in, is as good as anybody, especially in small small, tight quarters with that length. So I think that's going to be an interesting matchup. You mentioned Puka Nacua. His physicality, to me, is one of the interesting things here. I personally like the idea of a Josh Jobe or a Devin Witherspoon against him, just because they have proven to be more reliable open field tacklers than Woolen has. So despite the fact that Nacua is actually a bigger receiver than Devontae Adams, again, I would go with one of the smaller corners, Jobe or Witherspoon, matched up one-on-one when possible. But of course, the Rams do a great job of motioning their receivers and getting advantageous matchups. So that is going to be something to very much pay attention to. I mentioned before that this is a squad that has 3 tight ends, as well as their primary running back, Kyron Williams, who have more receptions than their number 3 wide receiver. That number 3 wide receiver is Jordan Whittington. He only has 12 catches on the season, doesn't have a single touchdown. But whether it be Tyler Higbee, Colby Parkinson, Davis Allen, their top draft pick, Tanner Ferguson, the rookie from Oregon, has made some splashy plays here. He's averaging 27 yards per reception, albeit in limited usage because he's been out most of the year with injury, but he is back and he provides a big play speed element similar to what the Seahawks have with Elijah Arroyo. Corbin, you mentioned all of the wide receiver talent. I just kind of talked about some of the tight ends as well. Matthew Stafford is just playing at such a brilliant level that it doesn't really matter. It could be me out there trying to catch passes from him right now. The way that Stafford is seeing the field, how quick his release is, and the fact that he is basically doing so many no-look passes, this is as dangerous of a passing attack as the Seahawks are going to be facing all year long.
And how do you neutralize that? You get pressure on Matthew Stafford, which has been hard to do this year. The Rams offensive line has done a really nice job keeping him clean. They've had a clean bill of health up front. And of course, Stafford, his ability to throw from every arm angle imaginable has made that easier too. And the no-look passes. But look, this is an area I think the Seahawks, I don't know necessarily that this is a game that it jumps out as big of an advantage they've had in some other games, because you've got guys like Kevin Dotson that are playing fantastic football in that Rams offensive line. They brought back Shelton and Coleman Shelton. All he's done is give them rock solid production at the center position. They've got Steve Avila at the other guard spot. This is a line that has really come together nicely for the Rams. So it's kind of been a strength for them, keeping the interior pressure away from Matthew Stafford. At the same time, they haven't played anybody that's got a D-line that's got Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy. And I think it's going to be a game that Mike Morris is able to get a little bit going because of what he does well. And maybe we see Brandon Peely with his mass in the middle. This is going to be a really fun back and forth tussle here. But I think for the Seahawks to win this game, you're going to need Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy II to bring their A games. And they're going to have to get some early pressure on Matthew Stafford and force him into some tough throws. He's not a guy that's overly mobile at this point in his career. So if you can prevent him from being, he's slippery. He's not a guy that's got great athleticism anymore. He moves the pocket at a really high level. You got to get to him and get him down to the ground. If they can get some licks on him early, that has a chance to put Matthew Stafford in a position he hasn't been very much this year, where he's feeling uncomfortable. And I think that is going to be pivotal to taking away some of the downfield passing that this team loves to do, that they've been killing teams with all year long. It starts with 99 in there with Leonard Williams, and also get number 99 or 91, Byron Murphy II rolling. Let those guys take over. And I think your edge guys can start to really feed off of that, as we saw last week.
Yeah, I think that this could be a big game for a Boye Mafe, a Chen Nwosu, a DeMarcus Lawrence, whoever you want to make, Derek Hall, the outside pass rushers. But Matthew Stafford's getting the ball out of his hands so damn quick. It's really difficult for those outside pass rushers to be able to actually get home. What I think is important is if they get upfield and then force Matthew Stafford to step up into the pocket. I think that Byron Murphy, to me, Leonard Williams is the best player on Seattle's defense. I don't think it's even close. I just think he's an unbelievable player. We've had this conversation a million times. Byron Murphy, however, is the one that I think might have a bit of an advantage just because of that short stature, his incredible lateral agility. I think that he might be able to kind of wiggle his way into, getting into the pocket and hitting Matthew Stafford. I also think that there's a possibility that Seattle just says, you know what, we're not going to be able to move these guys that are so big. I mean, the Rams interior 3 are as broad as it gets. I was kind of critical of Gray Zabel in the past, earlier. That is the exact opposite with the Rams interior 3. They are just as broad as it gets. But one thing you can do, and one thing that Mike McDonald's done an unbelievable job at doing, is creating opportunities for twists, stunts, looping, blitzers, things of that nature. That's where I think that you might see Seattle's linebackers, Nicky Manwari, perhaps safeties or cornerbacks be able to come in basically just following the lane that is provided by a Leonard Williams or a Brendan Peely or a Mike Morris, whoever, that provides a little bit of a rushing lane for them to get home on Matthew Stafford. Because as you said, he is not very mobile, but I do think that is Seattle's best opportunity to beat the Rams. As I said before, I think this is a better team. The Rams are a better team in my opinion. However, I think that Matthew Stafford is aging. He does have problems with his back. The Seahawks have to punish Matthew Stafford if they're going to be able to get this victory, in my opinion.
And it's easier said than done to do that with the way that this offensive line is playing. And I think the last matchup, we talked so much about the tight ends, but the running backs have been really dangerous for the Rams in their passing game. In particular, Williams has been a guy, as you mentioned, he's actually, I believe he's third on the team in receptions right now. They're using him a lot in the passing game. One of the big differences this year, though, they've unlocked Blake Corum, their second running back. And his first couple of years in the league, it was really quiet. They were struggling to get him going. He just couldn't get his feet underneath him. And he's having a rock-solid season as that change of pace back. And the Rams are using him a lot more. And he's another guy. He's only got 4 catches this year, but in college, he was involved in the passing game some. Both these backs can get the job done as all-around 3-down backs. And Matthew Stafford will be more than happy to dump it off, particularly if there's blitzes coming. He will get the ball to these running backs and let them go to work. And so the onus falls on these linebackers. We don't know if Ernest Jones is going to be out there. He was limited, or they have it estimated as limited today because they had a glorified walkthrough practice. But we'll see if Ernest Jones is back this week. Whether he is or not, though, if Tyrese Knight has to play, Drake Thomas, those guys are going to have to bring their hard hat. And you better be ready to tackle, because both these backs will break tackles in open space as receivers, and they can pick up yak in a hurry. That can't happen against this Rams team with all the other weapons that they have.
Yeah, that's just one of the matchups that concerns me a little bit, especially if Ernest Jones is not able to get onto the field. I mentioned that in yesterday's show, that Tyrese Knight, where after watching the All-22, he did struggle to get off blocks against the Arizona Cardinals. I promise you, the Los Angeles Rams noticed that. And so they are going to try to unleash those big guards and attack Seattle's linebackers. Even Drake Thomas, as productive as he has been, again, he's an undersized linebacker. Ernest Jones can get caught up in blocks as well. This is a Rams team that likes to run the football more so than some might think, considering how well that Matthew Stafford is playing. The Seahawks fans had just kind of grown accustomed to, of course, they're not going to be able to run on us. We're the Seattle Seahawks. Nobody can run on us. The Los Angeles Rams are certainly going to try. And so if the Seahawks are unable to keep up this, this fortress that has been their run defense in this game, then the Rams could, get ahead and then actually kind of pull away in this game. It may not be quite as close as Seahawks fans would like. If Seattle is able to make Matthew Stafford basically one-dimensional and just throw the ball, and you can get some hits on him, however, I do think the Seahawks have a really good chance of being able to pull off this victory. They are the more complete team. We talk so much about offensive defense. You look at special teams, that is one area where Seattle has a significant advantage over the Rams. It's going to be interesting to see if it comes down to just a kick from Jason Myers that might actually swing the balance in a game that I think is going to be as competitive as it gets in all the league.
As always, you can follow me on X and Blue Sky, Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. When we return tomorrow, it is Locked On Crossover Thursday. Locked On Seahawks, Locked On Rams. We'll be taking a deeper dive into this upcoming, can't wait, much anticipated matchup, Seahawks-Rams. Make sure you're listening in. Enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.